Now live from the U.S. city of New Orleans is Jeffrey Baumgarten. Jeffrey is an expert with the aviation consulting company Blue Hawk Aviation, I should say. Jeffrey, this story just seems beyond belief. What were your thoughts when you heard this latest news?
Well, I took a look at it today, and I think something that's a common misperception is that what he did with the autopilot was not detectable either by the people in the airplane or outside. He actually didn't change the flight path at all, and what he did was not apparent to air traffic control. And let me explain that for a moment to give your viewers an idea how the autopilot works. So he's actually asked to descend from 37,000 feet down to 35,000 feet. And when he did that, you dial in a new altitude. In my airplane, you actually press the button, and I'm not sure that's the way it works in the Airbus, but you press another button to actually begin the descent. While it's descending from 37,000 to 35,000, he then dials it down further, all the way down to 100 feet. But before he ever gets to 35,000 feet, he dials it back up, and it levels off at 35,000 feet. During that time, he also dialed it up to 49,000, but neither of those things made the airplane stop descending. And as long as he got to 35,000 feet with the dial before it got there, then it would level off. It was not apparent to anyone in the airplane, and it wouldn't be apparent to anyone outside of the airplane. He was later commanded or asked to descend to 21,000 feet, and this all happens with the captain outside of the cockpit using the lavatory, and he did the same thing. He starts the descent, and while the airplane's descending, he again dials it down to 100 feet. He dials it back up before it gets to 21,000 feet, and the captain re-enters the cockpit, and the airplane levels off at 21,000 feet. Nothing that he did would have been apparent to anyone in the airplane, including the captain, or to air traffic control.
So coy, deceptive, I guess you would say. If
Yes.
you were on that flight, you wouldn't have had any suspicions at all.
No, and obviously, you know, what is a question still is whether or not he was entertaining the thought of doing it on that flight, or he was just looking forward to the next flight, and will never, at least not from what I've seen, is there any answer to that question. But yes, I mean, the whole episode on both flights was very deceptive. There was no indication to the captain or the rest of the flight crew or to air traffic control what he was doing.
Yeah, Jeffrey, after the 9/11 attacks, I can remember talking to some flight attendants about a flight that they were on and concerns about a passenger on the flight trying to get into the cockpit. They were talking about cockpit security, that the doors should be locked. In this case, the doors were locked. I mean, what does this tell us about, this kind of double-edged sword? What do you think needs to be done there?
Well, certainly one of the great frustrations is that after 9/11, we turned all the doors into something that were really a very effective barrier, so that you really cannot get into the cockpit through any means of force now. And it is possible for the pilots to lock you out, and that's designed for a 9/11 hijacking type scenario to keep anyone from getting into the cockpit and turning the airplane into a weapon. Well, obviously the downside now is that as pilots go in and out to use the lavatory, if they're left in there alone, now they have the ability to lock anyone else out of the cockpit. I will say that this is the only episode in Western commercial aviation where a pilot has done this. There have been some other episodes in other parts of the world, but if you want to talk about the United States and Canada, New Zealand and Europe, this is the first time. And obviously, it is a trade-off, the security of forces or threats outside of the cockpit versus that rogue and evil pilot in this case who was willing to harm everyone on the airplane.
Jeffrey, you're a pilot. You must have a network of pilots that you talk to. What are all of you talking about when you look at this case?
Well, I think that most people's sense is that all of us in our profession feel a great obligation to take care of the people that fly on our airplanes. I mean, and safety really is, for all of us, our number one concern, to make sure that we get those people who've entrusted their lives to us to their destination safely. And to think that there was a person who not only violated that tenet, but was willing to actively harm the people, not just to not be safe, but to actually to murder these people, is a really unthinkable and disgusting thought. And anger is really how I feel about it. Obviously sadness for the victims, but anger at this individual.
Jeffrey Baumgarten talking to us from New Orleans. Thanks so much.